Let's go fight some demons.
Welcome, disciples of the internet, to my holy conquest where I will send demons back to hell without asking nicely. Faith is a horror game where you play as a priest in training, John Ward. And if you know much about horror games, you know that most of the time movement is restricted to increase the feeling of dread and helplessness. John can only slowly walk in 4 directions, but he does have one unique action, Jesus. Flash your cross at a demon, boom, goes away. Except for the bosses, but I will get to them when I get to them. However, if you are not perfectly on your toes when trying to ward off a demon, bam, dead in 1 hit. In the full version of Faith with all 3 chapters included, there is the marathon mode where the player is tasked with completing all 3 chapters in 1 session. Attached to this mode is the Good Christian Boy achievement, where the player has to beat marathon mode without dying once, and also getting the good endings in all 3 chapters, but that won't really matter until chapter 3. So sit back and watch me flawlessly take down Gary's menagerie of demons while slowly losing my sanity and flesh. But before the video begins, make sure to subscribe and toll the notification bell to view even more jelly-infused content. At the start of chapter 1, John pulls up to the edge of the forest with determination to finish an exorcism from a year ago that he failed. But before we can access the Martin household to exorcise Amy Martin, John must find a key hidden in a shack nearby. But before the key can be obtained, the game very quickly lets you know that you are not alone within these woods. What? How am I supposed to react to that? This is Michael. Michael will constantly harass you, so pulling up a map of the woods is the best strategy to make sure you spend the least amount of time in the woods as possible. Once you enter the shack, you pick up the house key and there's a scripted Michael encounter, so keep your hands on the Jesus key to make sure you don't have to spend more time in these woods than you already need to. Once John enters the Martin household, there are tons of rooms and lore that John can read to learn about the original exorcism that took place here, but we don't need to do any of that and can just head down straight to the basement. At the very back of the basement are some bloody symbols and the like, and after some trippy screen shaking, John somehow teleports to the upstairs bedroom with the premonition that Amy is still inside the house. Once you leave the bedroom, Amy will start invisibly following you, but you can determine her location via the symbols she leaves behind on the floor. After you catch her, 4 apparitions of Amy will appear around John. If you don't exercise the correct one in time, you die. The trick to determining the correct one is to see which ghost flashes differently than all the rest. After repeating this process a couple of times, the door to the attic will open. It is here where the boss fight against Amy takes place. There are 3 phases to the fight. The first is probably the most simple, where Amy will just stand there and strange gray shadow men will chase John on timed intervals. If you have just a little bit of patience, there's no way to lose this bit. The second phase involves Amy basically doing the exact same thing she did when you were wandering the house, except this time after you choose the correct one, Amy will charge at you from the opposite side. After you learn the gimmick, this bit is also quite trivial. The final phase shows a hand coming out of Amy's whole face, and Amy will start dancing in a star pattern and throw random circles of satanic symbols. The best option here is to stay at the center as much as you can and make subtle adjustments every time that Amy moves. What? No! No! If Amy moves about 5 times in a row, you have to move from your perch as a shadow man will come barreling at you. 5, 3... No! I thought... No! Oh my god! After a bit, Amy is defeated and proceeds to jump out the window. There's no more threat of death in chapter 1, so all that is left is to get the good ending. After picking up the gun near the entrance of the house, instead of shooting Amy, or a mirror, or a deer, you gotta shoot Michael as he appears just after you get back to your car. As John rides off into the night, we are awarded with our first good ending of 3. Chapter 2 begins with the short lore section where we see how Michael broke out into the woods. There's no way for Father Garcia to die in this section, so let's just get back to John. John wakes up in the forest, and spoiler alert, this is a dream. Well, more of a vision than a dream. Shortly after wandering the dream forest, John arrives at a graveyard where he has to fight 4 mini-bosses, including himself. In my runs, I decided to attempt the hardest bosses first, for the reason that if you defeat the first one, your stress in this section goes down drastically. The first demon claims to be an angel, which, no. This demon can move in a wave, which is quite annoying when you are so slow that it can be near impossible to escape the range of the wave. However, these demons have barely any HP, so this fight is one of the hard attacks that you don't have to endure for long. Oh, no! No! What? I thought they would... Next mini-boss, little demon baby thing that hops from smoke cloud to smoke cloud. If you pay attention, you can always tell which cloud the little gremlin is in, and before you know it, another demon is down. What? Final one requires one of those classic Mario RPG Lost Wood puzzles. You can tell which direction you need to go by following the directions the statues are pointing. After the final step is completed, the final demon appears in a quite anticlimactic fashion, which is only attacked being some wimpy dashes. Once John gets back to the spirit house, John stabs a knife in his eye and receives the key to escape the graveyard. Now on to the church. The church has a lot of extra stuff to do and lore notes to read, but we don't kill demons for the lore, we do it for the gameplay. Each room in the church has a set of candles, and the lighted candles represent you and the spindly lady. By checking to see if there's only one candle currently alight, you can flash your cross and the spindly lady will eventually appear. The spindly lady only has some teleporting mechanics and one giant dash. This makes it so the fight is quite easy, with the only problem being that it's quite annoying to reliably deal damage, which makes the fight a bit too long. What?
Mortis.
After the spindly lady is defeated, the basement opens up and the church is already done with. Shortly into the basement, John is given a picture with a group of symbols and the arrangement of a clock. Take a picture of this image, you are going to need it in about 5 seconds. The next room, there are a bunch of symbols in a grid pattern within a dark room. Follow the symbols in the same order they appear clockwise in the photo and John won't instantly die to the darkness. John then finds a spooky note and then melts. Thankfully, this doesn't count as a death as we are now a spider person. And after passing under this bridge, John is returned to his priestly form, and John is now given access to the Candy Tunnel. The Candy Tunnel is home to many miscellaneous spooks, including quite possibly the easiest demon in the game. All you have to do is just not move the second you see him, and you only have to do this once. After crawling through some pipes, you can come across access to the final level of the chapter, but we can't go in there yet as right now it's too dark. Thankfully, there's a flashlight in the room directly beneath us. However, it only provides light in a cone directly in front of you. This is a problem, especially since there's a boss fight directly after the player picks up the flashlight. The demon moves really slowly, with its only advantage being the low visibility. So I found the best strategy to be standing in the center of the room and spinning in a circle until I get a glimpse of the weird hand-faced demon and blast him back to where he came. After the advantage of light is achieved, we can now finally go into the demon house thing. This is one of the shortest areas in the chapter, but also one of the most nerve-wracking. You have to traverse 2 rooms to obtain a boss key, but there are some cultists that move in darkness who can only be repelled with a flashlight, which is hard to pull off when you can only shine the flashlight in 4 cardinal directions. My best strategy was just to spend as little time as possible in these rooms, and if they piled up, to just leave because it's not worth the risk. With the boss key in hand, John meets up with the dream version of Father Garcia to take down Miriam Bell. Quick lore dump here, so Miriam Bell was a cultist who tried to influence John at a young age but failed, and now in the future the cult's trying to use John as a vessel to summon the Antichrist. The final boss in chapter 2 adds a new layer of stress as the player must defend himself and Father Garcia when he recites the 91st Psalm. My advice is to focus on the little red guys that pop out of the door as they instantly go for Garcia, and you really need him for the next phase of the fight and to get the good ending. After some darkness shenanigans, the boss fight resumes properly with Miriam using a lot of the same attacks we've seen across our journey. But with Father Garcia, we have double the Christ, which makes the fight progress much faster. As Miriam dies, John gets another vision and finally awakes from his nightmare. John gets a letter from Father Garcia that states that Amy Martin's brothers, the twins, are now the new targets of the cult and they will use them to summon the demon Malphas. So John hops in his car for the longest and final chapter of the game. Chapter 3 is split into 3 sections, 3 demon-infested locations that the twins can potentially reside in. But as mentioned at the start, Chapter 3 has a lot more requirements to receive the good ending than Chapter 1 and 2 did. In each of these areas, along with doing the main quest, you also have to do a little side quest that ends in the player fighting the secret boss. The first area is the clinic, in which many patients have undergone intense surgeries to turn themselves into portals to hell. At the back of the clinic is a door barred by wood, so John picks up a crowbar in the opposite end of the building, but before the wood can be removed, a demon kindly destroys the barrier for us. John awakes on a stretcher in a new room with a funny meme on one of the curtains. After shuffling around a bit, John remarks that you need to hide, and you can do so via these purple curtains. While the demon is distracted, John can scurry into the next room and hide amongst these bodies. Thankfully, a police officer arrives to get John out of the stretcher and then walk to the entrance of the clinic. But then the red demon appears one more time, but he's no match for the power of Jesus and a Colt 38 revolver. This ends the main quest of the clinic, but if John ventures back inside and straps himself on the gurney once more, a door will open up that sends John spiraling down a staircase. At the bottom of the staircase is the secret boss, who is this woman with a lot of pink demon babies. The demon babies cannot actually harm the player, so try to focus on the woman as much as possible. But if one of the babies starts to wander off to the side, shift your focus to them as they can morph into screaming flesh spiders monsters that can actually kill you. After enough exercising, the babies actually cover the woman and act as a flesh shield, but eventually the shield will dwindle down, and the second time this happens, the woman is gone. After leaving the clinic, John is told of the presence of Gary, who is basically a demon cult leader who is trying to summon the Antichrist. Once John gets into his car, cutscene plays that shows 1/3 of a sigil being destroyed, which will come important later. The apartments is the next area that houses a full 10 floors for the player to explore, but if you know what you're doing, you only have to explore about half of them. Floor 3 contains Tiffany's apartment, who is another cultist that is obsessed with Gary. In this apartment is a key that leads to Lisa's apartment. Lisa is a friend of John who knew him all the way back in the days when Miriam Bell tried to influence them. In Lisa's apartment is a barrier and another key. The key opens the door to the 10th floor where John can give up his cross in order to access the basement. But now there is no more protection, but at least we have a camera. There will be a lot of hallucinations during the sequence, but not a lot of them can hurt you, until you catch this gray demon who will appear behind you and give chase. The demon is quite slow, and a couple camera flashes can give you a good idea of the room layout. In the basement is a cross, so you no longer have to be naked without the cross. Near the cross is a ritual mask that, when exercised, will destroy 1/2 of the barrier in Lisa's apartment. After going back upstairs, John gets possessed, but we are a good Christian boy, so it does not last for long. In one of the apartments John walks through in the camera segment is a knife, and now that John has his cross again, the knife can be exercised and the other half of the door covering sigil is destroyed. When John walks through the door, he finds Lisa, but now Lisa is possessed by the same demon we saw earlier. The demon will run into one of these statues, and you need to Jesus blast the correct one, and the demon returns to Lisa. After this repeats a few times, the demon flees, and the main quest of the apartment building is over. Now time to play the elevator game. John tries to access the 7th floor, he's denied, and the game screams at you, but if you do this enough times, the elevator friend spawns. The elevator friend works quite similarly to Michael in Chapter 1, except he descends from the ceiling. After repelling the elevator friend enough times, you are given some notes with a code to play the elevator game. Following the 8 floors in order, John is sent to floor infinity and finds Tiffany, who has gone against the cult and trying to perform the portal to hell ritual on herself. Tiffany slowly moves towards you, but about 5 times during the fight, Tiffany will bounce from wall to wall while spewing souls. After Tiffany is defeated, staring and shows as Tiffany's corpse will crawl at you in the second room. After receiving another taunting note from Gary, John jumps down a few holes and lands in the mysterious 7th floor. However, the twins are not here either. Once John gets back to his car, yet another cutscene plays that shows the next third of the sigil being destroyed. The final area is the daycare, even though you spend about 3 minutes here. After a simple puzzle, John is now in a red cellar that is the main base of operations for the cult. Sadly for them, these cultists are much weaker than the demons we have seen earlier in our journey, so they go down quickly. In a room of chairs is a puzzle that is impossible to solve. Literally, don't even try. After moving up and down these rooms a couple times, Gary will appear behind a pillar and knock John unconscious. After John wakes up, he realizes that he may or may not have gone on a murder spree, but that's not as important as the final part of the sigil being broken. If you constantly stare at these 2 paintings, this giant demon head will appear, who is quite possibly the easiest boss fight in the game. You can freely move between rooms to reset him, and even if you die, you are sent to a cutscene where you can revive to where you left off. After this head is destroyed, so is the final part of this mysterious sigil. Now back to the actual main quest, where you need to collect 3 offerings in order to get in this statue. First one is simple, you just have to watch some multiplying statues and dodge a mutated cultist. And these guys are awful, as sometimes they just decide you die. Oh! You avoided that. Wait! The next one involves you fighting the mirror demon, which is quite simple as he gets much slower once he gets closer to you. Final offering has you playing a game of red light green light, and you are given many gracious in-between periods. And once you get the offering, you can just run away. After descending into the statue, there is this little darkness segment that introduces the player to these purple Malphas enemies. They are very easy, but that's kind of the point, as you have to fight them in areas with basically no visibility. Before the final boss you reach, John has to traverse the forest filled with these things, but if you go through the screens fast enough, you can escape the forest faster than the enemies can spawn. Once John goes through the door, he finally gets an actual face-to-face conversation with Gary, who tells John that the twins were never real, a trick of the cult, and that John was actually the intended vessel to summon the Antichrist. Now it is time for the boss fight against Gary, and it's actually quite easy, as every time you're hit, you can crawl back to your cross and continue the fight. As Gary lunges at John, he is shot by a shotgun thanks to our friend Father Garcia. And in the next room, we see the hole that is now accessible thanks to the sigil that we removed earlier. In this hole, full is the very final boss of the game. Gary shows his true form and dashes at John, all while laying some sigil traps. This section brings back the instant death, so make sure to stick to your toes. After dealing a great deal of damage, Malphas officially reveals that he has been summoned and shoots arrows from the side of the screen. You don't have to exercise any specific demon, and they both have the same health pool. After dealing enough damage, Malphas, Gary, and Miriam Bell combine to form the Unholy Trinity. This time, John has the ability to take 10 hits with the new ability to pray to God every time you are hit. Once these 3 demons are separated, John can throw himself into the fire and run into Miriam Bell to end the Unholy Trinity. Walk into the fire. Go, go, go. Quick. Yes! Take this. Soon afterwards, Amy appears and Gary is sent back into hell. Amy is given some moments of consciousness and John can finally finish what he started, and Amy's soul is set free. Once John leaves covered in blood, we can now partner up with Father Garcia to kill even more demons, and the good Christian boy achievement is, well, achieved. And if you want to view even more jelly-soaked sleep paralysis demon fuel, stick around.